Do you use references in your work? Do you find a little voice inside that tries to dissuade you from utilizing photos and getting outside to see what something actually looks like? You're in good company. Greetings, my name is Zach, and I taught middle and high school art for over a decade. We are going over 5 reasons why you, yes you, and me, why we should use more references in our artwork. As we get started, please share in the comments below the last reference you used and when that was. These 5 reasons work together, so please stick around till the end. First of all, references make your finished piece more accurate to real life. This should come as no surprise to anyone who has spent a substantial amount of time in the arts. How many of us have had art teachers over the years who have pushed us back to photos or back to the still life in the middle of the room to fix something in our piece? If your goal is to make something look accurate, referring to the real life analog is undoubtedly going to make the final product better. One of the best components of this improvement is how reference helps us fill in the gap between what we know and what we think we know. So much of our visual memory is incomplete. When we think of something like a giraffe, we can see it in our mind. We can see it pretty clearly, too. Maybe we can even see it moving around and stretching out its neck to reach leaves above the savanna. But when we sit down to draw that clear image from our minds, the drawing always seems to come up short, doesn't it? This is the gap that reference chips away at. Every time you use a reference, you can reduce that gap just a little for that particular topic. References fill in the gaps and make our pieces look more accurate. Even if you are painting a dragon, working from chameleons and vipers will give you a better understanding of how reptilian eyes function and how scales overlap and move. These things are invaluable. On a very different note, using references can dial down the stress of a piece of art. When you don't have the burden of pulling everything out of your own head, you can lean on the reference material and pull the necessary information from that. As art can often be stressful, reducing that stress and giving yourself some easy wins is always a good thing in my book. You may not always want to use references in your work, and I certainly understand. But especially when engaging in your work seems stressful or anxiety-inducing, leaning on a reference can ease that engagement. It can lighten the burden you may be placing on yourself. Reference can make it easier to get back to work, and often it is rewarding. When I had students struggling to replicate a very specific thing, and I could encourage them to use reference or find the reference for them, I could watch the stress melt away as their lines and shading coalesced into something understandable. Success feels good, and with how hard drawing and painting can be, hold on to every success you can. References have another interesting benefit that you can see coming together over time, and that is how they reinforce and add to your visual memory. Like I mentioned earlier about the giraffe, our visual memory is often incomplete, and our memories are often more emotion than they are detail. But every time you look something up and draw it, your brain holds on to a little bit more of that detail. You might have seen this in your own life. Maybe a kid in your class owned horses and drew them better than everyone else. Maybe someone had a pet turtle and, of course, their turtle painting was more accurate than everyone else's. This is a result of continual reinforcement of their visual library. The more you look at something, analyze, and in an artistic world, replicate it, the more you truly understand and remember it. This is an easy benefit to test. Pick a thing you are terrible at drawing. Now draw it from memory. Then draw the same thing a whole bunch of times from reference, and then attempt drawing it from memory again. See? This pretty much always works. For a more detailed explanation, though, check out my video on how to actually improve at drawing. The interesting and difficult to quantify aspect of this is how transferable all of these components become. The more you draw from reference, the easier other things become to draw as well. It seems that this is related to the qualities, not of the thing you have been referencing, but of our physical reality in general. The more you learn to draw spherical, conical, and cylindrical shapes, the easier those forms become, regardless of whether it is a man-made structure, the foreleg of a dog, or a tree trunk. Like I mentioned, this is much harder to directly quantify, but I've seen it in my own work and the work of dozens of students over the years. The benefits of reference material to your long-term visual memory are hard to dispute, though. The more you work from a thing, the better you get at it, if you study it, and you keep yourself from just copying. Speaking of copying, references also help you build good habits, and they keep you humble. It's hard to dispute that referencing the real thing or a much better drawing than you are capable of making will keep you humble. Using reference is also a wonderful habit to build into your repertoire. If you don't already have dedicated practice time, consider putting some referential practice time front and center in your practice routine. I started most classes with a warm-up of some kind. With my middle school students, this was usually a series of goofy prompts that they could choose from, like a tornado of walruses or a weather-changing machine. But for my upper division students, it was usually gesture and figure drawing. These classes would have 3 to 5 minutes of timed referential drawing as a built-in daily structure. This gets your mind in the right place, and as mentioned earlier about stress, this kind of drawing is often less demanding and provides a good platform to move into a creative headspace. Using reference is a good habit I cannot overemphasize the importance of. And going back to the humility for a moment, these habits and studious activities can help remind us that we are all students, that we all have things to work on and learn. Being a student, you can hopefully retain that oh so important humility for the sake of improvement. The last of our 5 reasons is all of the subtle and unanticipated objects and inclusions that come with reference material. Because references do not exist in a vacuum, they always come with other components. It might be as subtle as the lighting or atmosphere, but sometimes it can be drastic. If you need a reference for a particular pose, in your mind, you likely only want that silhouette of the form, juxtaposed over a field of nothing. But that's not what you get. You look up an image, probably going through a few dozen to find what you want, this whole time seeing other interesting things. When you land on an image that has a pose close to what you desired, well, now he's wearing clothes and has a tattoo. And what's that in the background? A palm tree? I didn't really think about him having facial hair, but now that I see it on the reference. These kinds of things happen so naturally during the process that you might not even be aware of them. Each of these extra inclusions affects you, hits you subconsciously, if nothing else, and some of those little things end up in your final piece, and now have a tag somewhere in that visual library. So next time you sit down to draw a dragon, a beautiful vista, or design your own OC, consider using just a little more reference. If you want some more reference-based content, check out this video about common myths about references. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.